Hi everyone, here are the podcasts for the Frontiers of Science Fall 2024 class. Get ready and follow along the various topics covered by the students here at Columbia University.
Good morning, my name is Holland Goss. I'm joined today by Kate Schneider, Kieran Eldridge, and Jaso Im as we discuss renewable resources. What is the best alternative to fossil fuels?
Wait, what's the big idea about these fossil fuels? What really are they?
Kieran, I am just so glad you asked. Fossil fuels are made up of the combination of fossilized plant and animal remnants. After millions of years underground, remains such as plankton and plants decompose into natural gas, oil, and coal. These resources are then mined from the earth, allowing us to burn them in order to provide the necessary power for all workings of human life.
Wait, so are these fossil fuels effective?
That's a great question. So before fossil fuels, the main energy source was biomass, like wood burning, which became highly unsustainable. During the Industrial Revolution, first with coal, then with oil and natural gas, cities were able to efficiently power industry, agriculture, transportation, and more. The large energy stored into fossil fuels was a vast improvement, allowing our economy and population to get to the place it is today. Now that we use electricity, about 64% of usage still comes from fossil fuels, and the reality is that it's hard to quit our current sources of energy.
Though fossil fuels are clearly very effective and efficient, I've heard a lot about the production of greenhouse gases. So what exactly are they?
Well, greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide are critical in regulating Earth's temperature by trapping heat in the atmosphere. While this natural greenhouse effect is essential for life, human activities like burning fossil fuels have significantly increased greenhouse gas levels. These gases are released through everyday activities like driving cars, farming, and waste decomposition. Their accumulation ultimately drives climate change, causing us to seek alternatives.
What do we do about that?
So one approach to taking part in the global energy transition is the Paris Climate Accord, which is essentially a global commitment to change that 195 countries agreed to in December of 2015. However, recently, global powers like the USA and Germany have pulled out, and so carbon dioxide emissions are rising again.
It sounds like these renewable energy sources could change the game. Speaking of renewables, today we are joined by 4 scientists, each a specialist in their own respective niche of renewable energy. First up, we have Gamma Quicksilver, here to talk about nuclear energy.
First off, thank you so much for having me today. So I'm going to be talking about nuclear energy, specifically with the use of nuclear power plants. So nuclear energy is harnessed through a process called nuclear fission, and through this process, nuclear power plants can produce mass amounts of energy that can power entire cities with electricity. So as opposed to other renewable energy resources, nuclear power is significantly more efficient and less reliant on external resources. Power plants also require limited maintenance because once they're installed and developed and people are hired to run the safety precautions, they do not need to be reinstalled or fixed or altered with new developments.
Nuclear power plants are not safe enough to rely on for energy. Think about past nuclear disasters like Chernobyl. They caused widespread contamination all across Europe. Their people are terrified of nuclear disasters.
I completely understand your point there. However, the Chernobyl disaster was in 1986, and since then, AI developments have helped drastically to improve safety measures. This means that we can predict the stability of a power plant before its creation, and with these precautions, we can prevent these disasters entirely.
I was not finished. Also, you failed to mention nuclear waste. These power plants produce waste that cannot be destroyed and have to be stored underground. This takes up a lot of space and can be very dangerous. Finally, most people are scared of nuclear power, so installing more power plants could anger civilians. Power plants also take up a lot of space, so the installation of them could displace people from their homes. Nuclear power is simply not the best choice. Guten Morgen, everyone. My name is Dr. Gail Verwind, and I'm here to talk about wind energy. Ja? Wind energy uses humongous wind turbines to convert wind into energy. It literally uses the wind, a clean resource that we will never run out of, to make electricity. Wind greatly reduces carbon emissions due to its abstinence from releasing harmful pollutants, which greatly improves the quality of our air. And a study was done in 2017 examining the effects of wind power utilization on the climate and air quality of the United States of America when compared with the effects of fossil fuel utilization, and how these effects have changed from 2000 to 2015. Und mouthful, ja? They found that while the benefits of reducing emissions from wind power have actually gone down in the past several years, they haven't gone down as quickly as the other emissions from the entire power industry, meaning that the large increase in wind power generation has led to climate and air quality benefits overall. Along with that, the turbines themselves are recyclable and can be placed on land and on sea, making them very space efficient. I think we have a clear winner with wind energy.
Yo, hold up with this whole wind thing, man. I'm not into it. Actually, the ideal locations for wind turbines where wind is abundant, they're often very remote and costly to connect to the overall power grid. Along with that, these giant turbines are an eyesore. The rotation of blades creates an absurd amount of noise. Killing me, man. Worst of all, wind plants harm the local wildlife. I want to save the fish, save the turtles, stop the noise. Offshore is even worse, man. It's the vibrations and noise from the turbines detrimental to day-to-day lives of these fish. Wind energy truly isn't as perfect as we make it fade. Gotta stop. Hey, by the way, my name is Dr. Leif Erikson. I'm here to talk about plants, man. As we mentioned before, biomass was used before fossil fuels, with methods like wood burning. And in this way, bioenergy is pretty similar to older processes of harnessing energy through direct combustion of plant matter. But the techniques haven't been improved. Bioenergy production is more efficient through pressurized systems of combustion, and plant matter can also be chemically converted into fuel. Pretty rad, dude. We have natural energy sources from plant matter, and they're convertible into resources like transportation fuel, power the planes, power the buses, power the cars, and it's even beneficial for rural communities to develop bioenergy businesses. One research study looked at geographical computer models of biomass production and showed the capability for high yields in many regions. Although plants are pretty susceptible to changes in climate we're now experiencing. For example, the study showed success in temperate regions, but when it's drought and arid, it was not so great. But bioenergy infrastructure, it's very important to consider regional conditions of soil, water, and climate. But overall, bioenergy is rad, dude. Growing plants and utilizing natural waste. Gotta fight the carbon. Go plants. Go plants.
Hold on. Bioenergy is land intensive, so it requires a lot of space to grow crops and install infrastructure. Additionally, bioenergy technology is difficult to replace. So do we really want to compromise natural ecosystems? Additionally, setup, production, and transportation for biofuels can potentially contribute even more to greenhouse gas emissions. Although growing plant matter is renewable, it may not be enough to offset the combustion of plant matter. While we are doing more research on bioenergy due to its demand of land use, we cannot globalize it, and its use is very, very limited. Your faces are filled with confusion, so let me tell you what makes hydropower such a compelling renewable energy option. Hydropower is one of the oldest and most widely used renewable energy sources. It works by harnessing the power of moving water to generate electricity. Today, it supplies roughly 16% of the world's electricity, making it a major player in the global energy mix. As long as water continues to flow, electricity can be produced. Unlike solar and wind, which can be intermittent due to weather's conditions, hydropower provides a consistent energy output. According to a study on hydroelectric power generation in Cameroon, while hydropower can increase electricity price volatility in the short term due to high upfront costs, it significantly reduces energy prices in the long run.
Hydropower plants require extensive infrastructure such as dams and reservoirs and are thus very expensive. These projects can take decades to complete, making them less ideal in comparison to energy sources like wind or solar farms. Building dams and altering river systems can also have significant ecological consequences. Dams disrupt the natural flow of rivers, affecting fish migration patterns, which leads to a decline in biodiversity. Additionally, constructing large dams often involves flooding vast areas of land, which can displace entire communities. For example, the construction of the Three Gorges Dam in China led to the relocation of over 1 million people, causing both social and economic disruption. Hydropower is also highly dependent on water flow. This means that during periods of drought, electricity generation can be severely impacted.
Guys, we need to stop fighting.
Whether you feel strongly about one energy resource over another, I think we can all agree on one thing, that our global reliance on fossil fuels is causing irreversible damage to our environment. We must take part in the global energy transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies, and here are some ways that you can help to raise awareness and contribute to efforts to protect our planet from the ongoing climate crisis. One way you could help to contribute is to help us draft legislation to implement more renewable energy resources in the United States. You could also sign petitions for various projects in your state or local government.
You could also become more involved in education within your own community. Talk to people about the harmful effects of fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions and the alternatives discussed within this podcast. Thank you.
I just didn't say that.
Welcome to Free Will versus Fate. I'm Marika, and today I'm here with Benya, Ali, and Yassine to explore a big question. Do we truly have free will, or is each choice shaped by external forces? Is there even a real answer? Let's start with the basics. Free will is the capacity to make decisions independently, without predetermined outcomes or manipulation. It's a concept that really impacts everything. If free will doesn't exist, do our choices even matter? Or are they even our choices? To dive into this, we'll discuss a neuroscience perspective, then shift to a more philosophical lens towards the end. Along the way, we'll tackle topics like visual processing, conscious versus subconscious movements, insights from brain damage, and some more complex ideas about the human psyche. First, we have Ali on image visualization.
Image visualization is the idea that we can voluntarily create mental images. A study by Joel Pearson and Roger Robert explored this using fMRI scans, which measure brain activity through oxygen levels. Participants were asked to choose what to visualize while their brain activity was recorded with the fMRI. Here's their surprising finding. Brain activity could predict what participants would imagine up to 11 seconds before they consciously made their choice. This indicates that our brains might decide for us before we're even aware of it. So, if our brains are calling the shots, are the decisions we make truly ours? Next, Vinya will take on this conversation, looking at another similar study. The findings of Matsuhashi and Hallett consider an experiment on decision timing. Participants were asked to press a button whenever they felt like it and would record the moment they became aware of their decision. Occasionally, a beep would sound. If the subjects heard the beep before consciously deciding to press the button, they were instructed not to press it at all. This ensured that the beep acted as a filter, preventing subjects from acting if they hadn't yet fully decided. The interruption revealed something fascinating. Participants often thought they had decided to press the button, even though the beep had already occurred and stopped them. Essentially, our sense of free will might just be the brain retroactively filling in the narrative. Our choices are already set in motion before we quote-unquote decide. Now, Ali and I will look at some observations on this topic brought by studies of neurological conditions. We'll start by discussing a rare condition called alien limb syndrome. As discussed by neurologist Ryan Darby in the Scientific American, patients with this condition experience involuntary movements in their limbs due to damage or lesions in specific brain regions, revealing two important things. Volition depends on a coordinated network of brain regions, and when this network is disrupted, a person's control over their actions, what we would call free will, is profoundly altered. Passing it back to Vinya. Another example is frontotemporal dementia, a condition that damages the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain, regions crucial for decision-making and impulse control. Researchers Drubach, Rabenstein, and Milano demonstrated how patients with this condition often lose the ability to suppress automatic responses. For example, they may blurt out inappropriate remarks or impulsively grab objects, behaviors they once could have restrained. This again suggests that what we perceive as voluntary behavior may actually depend on a healthy brain's ability to simply inhibit impulses. Now, Yassine and Marika will tell us more about complex philosophical perspectives on these ideas.
To start, the big idea is that many people think free will is not a black and white concept. Eddie Namias, writing in the Scientific American, argues that conscious deliberation plays a key role in our decision-making. For instance, conscious planning and intention can guide behavior, like when strategizing in a game of chess. Or imagine you're about to give a presentation. While your nerves might spark an automatic stress response, you consciously choose to focus on your breathing and recall your prepared points, allowing you to perform well despite the pressure. This example suggests that free will isn't absolute. It operates on a spectrum between subconscious processes and awareness.
Another counter to the neuroscience perspective considers the idea of self-control. The famous marshmallow experiment from 1972, as explored in Andrea Labaz's article Free Will in Neuroscience, shed some light on this view. In this study, children were given a choice: eat one marshmallow or wait 15 minutes to get two. Those who resisted the immediate reward seemed to achieve greater success later in life, showing how self-control influences not just single choices, but long-term behavior. This ties into free will by indicating that the decisions we make aren't random. They're often the result of thoughtful restraint and weighing the pros and cons of a situation.
Overall, free will is a question that remains endlessly complex. From how we visualize choices, to the interplay of conscious and subconscious movement, to more holistic considerations of self-control and deliberation, it's clear that our decisions are shaped by much more than simple choice. Whether free will exists as its own force or emerges from intricate brain systems, one thing is certain: the feeling of control profoundly shapes how we live. And perhaps the very act of questioning it is the strongest evidence of free will in action.
Thanks for listening to our first episode, Free Will versus Fate. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast Beyond the Mind for more brain-related content. Welcome back to Triple Helix Hackers. Today, we have some very special guests to tackle the subject of genetic editing. I'm Dr. Legaser, and I will be mediating today's contentious debate. First, please welcome Ms. Adenina, a moral advocate who has some strong opinions on genetic engineering and its regulations. And last, but certainly not least, we have Mr. Thymino, a research enthusiast who believes technological advancement should not be hindered. Before we get into it, a quick overview of today's topic. Genetic engineering is the process of altering an organism's DNA to give it new traits. Some examples of which include making crops resistant to pests, improving food nutrition, or treating diseases in people by fixing faulty genes. Scientists do this by identifying a specific gene, altering or adding it to the organism's DNA, and then ensuring it works as intended. Genetic engineering is a field that is changing every day, and scientists are still in the preliminary phases of exploring its full potential.
If you don't mind, Dr. Ligaser, I'd like to jump in and say just how amazing this engineering is.
Thank you so much for the input, Mr. Thaimino. Now, before you get too ahead of yourself, we'll begin with the first question of the debate. How does the advancement of genetic engineering positively impact the world?
Gene editing has provided us with a new way to approach genetic disorders. It can be used to cure diseases and even prevent them from passing along altogether. Using tools like in vitro fertilization and CRISPR, scientists have found ways to change people's lives for the better. Many people with genetic disorders struggle with it for the entirety of their lives. But genetic editing has provided us with a way to finally relieve them of their suffering.
Mr. Thaimino, this seems great in theory, but is there any evidence to prove this?
I'm so thrilled you asked. Victoria Gray is a wonderful example of how genetic editing can be used to change people's lives. Victoria Gray was diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, but when she was only 3 months old. The disease took over her life as she felt constant pain and fatigue. Doctors could only prescribe pain medication to relieve her of her symptoms, but even that only did so much. When she was presented with the opportunity to participate in a biotechnology study that used CRISPR to edit cells from her bone marrow and potentially cure her, she immediately said yes. The CRISPR therapy changed her life, and now it is being reviewed as a potential treatment for sickle cell anemia.
But that's only one case about one disease.
Mrs. Adenia, please allow Mr. Thaimino to finish.
Genetic editing can be used in many other ways. It can be utilized to improve pregnancy outcomes and recovery after traumatic brain injury, as found in studies published in the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the American Journal of Medical Genetics, and the Cell Press.
Thank you for your passionate explanation. Mrs. Adenia, what is your response to Mr. Thaimino's argument?
Well, I cannot deny that gene editing technologies like CRISPR have shown promise in potentially treating genetic disorders, but Mr. Thaimino's incompetent self and annoying voice fails to mention the various ethical, scientific, and societal concerns that come along with it. While curing diseases like sickle cell anemia through CRISPR may seem like a breakthrough, there is a risk of unintended consequences. Gene editing results in changes passed down to future generations and could have long-term effects that we do not yet fully understand. We risk playing God with genetic material, making irreversible decisions that could impact not just the individuals being treated, but also future generations.
The only long-term effects of this technology would be reducing the risk of passing on these harmful genes to future generations. I just don't see what could be bad about that.
Please, no more interruptions, or I will have to mute your microphones.
Also, going back to Mr. Thaimino's example of this, Victoria Gray, probably not even a real person by the way, this success story is an outlier rather than the rule. The studies on these topics cannot be considered very reliable as the subjects are rarely randomized and these tests are not done on a fitting representation of the human population, but rather distinct groups. The technology is not yet foolproof, and more research is needed to ensure the safety and precision of these methods before we rush to apply them broadly. Additionally, gene editing opens the door to the possibility of eugenics, selectively breeding for certain traits or eliminating others from the gene pool. While the initial aim is to eradicate genetic diseases, it could evolve into the pursuit of creating a genetically superior population, raising serious concerns about human diversity, autonomy, and the potential for societal harm.
Now, this all sounds very scary. Can you provide us with an example of the consequences of genetic manipulation?
Yes, very glad you asked. In 2018, there was a controversial event where He Jiankui, a Chinese biophysicist, claimed to have edited the genes of twin girls named Lulu and Nana to confer resistance to HIV. Directly following this, there was an international outrage over the lack of proper informed consent and damaged public trust in the ethical conduct of scientific research. As a result of the global condemnation from fellow scientists, ethicists, and human rights groups, He Jiankui was fired from his position at Southern University in China and faced legal actions from the Chinese government. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for his role in conducting illegal human embryo gene editing. In the rush to use groundbreaking evidence, and technologies, we must balance innovation with caution to ensure that the science is conducted in ways that benefit humanity rather than harm it. Hey, why'd you lose? You lost. You sound like a crow mocking me, and I'm gonna do a background search on you to see if you're.
Please, Mr. Adeninia, Mr. Thymino. Let's be civil adults. Let's be civil adults, please. No more! Thank you both for the insightful debate today. And a huge thank you for our audience for joining in. Make sure to smash that subscribe button and follow our Instagram, Triple Helix Hackers. If you want to learn more about this topic, keep up with our own newspaper, The Daily Helix, and subscribe to the only peer-reviewed gene editing journal, the CRISPR Journal. Thank you again for joining us today.
Welcome to Stereotypes Unpacked, where we break down complex, health-based stereotypes into engaging and insightful scientific discussions. Today we will be tackling a subject that is as intriguing as it is misunderstood: pain tolerance across biological sexes.
When discussing physical pain, society often paints women as physically weaker than men. Yet, paradoxically, society often celebrates women for enduring some of the most intense pain the body can experience: childbirth. This has created a complicated narrative of what it really means to endure pain as a woman versus as a man.
In this episode, we will explore the biological, psychological, and social dimension of pain tolerance. We'll examine first the differences in pain perception from a purely biological standpoint, second, how biology is not so black and white between sexes, and third, how social expectation may also influence our perception of physical pain. Get ready to challenge social stereotypes and rethink human pain tolerance on the basis of biological sex.
Let's begin by discussing the fascinating research from the Journal of Pain, which examined how gender and age influence the perception and processing of pain.
In the study, researchers applied increasing heat to participants' skin and determined the exact moment at which each participant felt minimal, mild, or moderate pain. With the use of fMRI machines, researchers were then able to gain insight into brain activity, specifically linking physical pain to the neural pathway that processes it.
In accordance with their hypothesis, women had lower pain thresholds than men, as they felt pain at lower temperatures than them. Brain imaging revealed that with age, men's brains activated pain-modulating regions more effectively, while women's brains showed a decline in this ability. This suggests that aging may weaken the brain's ability to regulate pain more significantly in women than in men.
But here's where things get even more interesting. This is what transitions us to our second point. Biology is not that simple.
In fact, according to a study in the International Journal of Psychophysiology, a woman's pain threshold fluctuates with the phase of her menstrual cycle. When estrogen and progesterone levels increase, which occurs at a woman's luteal phase, individuals showed significantly higher pain tolerance than in their follicular phase, where their hormones were not as present.
Wow, this makes a lot of sense actually, especially when considering cycle syncing, which we often hear women use in the gym community. This is the concept of adjusting physical activity to align with the phases of the menstrual cycle.
It is particularly interesting, especially as biological males do not experience a menstrual cycle, and as such there is no fair basis upon which to compare both sexes.
Taking this into consideration, we can argue that the stereotype of women being physically weaker than men is not a fair argument, since it oversimplifies the concept of pain in women.
Geez, now if you thought that was interesting, let's take it one step further and explore how we fail to acknowledge the complexity and intricacies of sex and gender that exist within our society.
Yes, there are many other psychological and social factors that can also contribute to the differences in perception of pain in men and women, such as trait and state gender.
Trait gender colloquially refers to masculinity and femininity, and state gender refers to self-imposed gender bias. In this investigation, participants' pain tolerance was measured by having them place their hand into an ice bath until they could no longer continue to endure this pain.
What they found, which was most striking, was that contrary to their hypotheses, the participants who scored higher in masculinity had lower pain tolerance than females, and masculine females showed the highest pain ratings for females, while masculine males exhibited the lowest pain ratings.
Wow, this makes sense given the twisted world we live in. People don't do their research.
Yes, men are not subject to pain tolerance stereotyping either. Society often portrays an acceptable man as being tough and unaffected by discomfort. We often hear the narrative that it is a sign of weakness for a man to show emotion as a result of pain, whether that be physical or emotional. What society often fails to realize is that this narrative can actually deter men from seeking help when it is crucially needed.
This is so true. There are many men who refuse to seek help due to the preconceived notion that men are stronger if they do not show or express their pain. This can have obviously detrimental effects on individuals' health since it may lead to an untreated physical and/or mental condition.
So what can we learn from all this? Although pain is a biological experience, it is not solely determined by biological factors. It is also swayed by society's perception of men and women. Therefore, understanding these different perspectives is critical for effectively navigating health and could lead to an improvement in our healthcare system.
Yes, this makes sense. If differences in pain tolerance weren't such a frontier of science and were more widely known, healthcare providers would be better able to tailor treatments that would effectively address the unique needs of male and female patients.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Stereotypes Impact, uncovering sexism in pain tolerance. We hope that we were able to challenge your preconceived ideas on the topic of pain perception and comparison between men and women.
Next time you're confronted with a gender stereotype, ask yourself the root of such assumption and whether or not it is possibly backed by science.
Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and tell your parents about our Facebook.
Hello everybody, my name is Arjun and with me today are my podcast co-hosts Cole and Eddie. How are y'all doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
I'm also doing great. Thanks for having us.
Great to hear. We're here to discuss this up-and-coming fuel source called biofuel. To give everybody a basic understanding of biofuels, well, chances are you probably heard about it already.
Yeah, humans have been using biofuels for a couple 100,000 years. We've been using trees and firewood and coal. Those are just some examples.
Exactly. Anything that technically means any fuels that comes from like a currently living or formerly living matter. That's the case. Why even talk about it right now, right? Like, why even bother? We've been using it for hundreds of years, so what's the result of that?
Well, I am glad you asked that, Eddie, because biofuels may be part of the solution to the fossil fuels issue that we're having right now. Technically, fossil fuels are a part of biofuels, but fossil fuels produce greenhouse gases that warm the planet. There are technically biofuels that can burn cleaner to produce the same amount of energy. And that is why we're here right now.
Yeah, so to learn more about this, I went ahead and read this really interesting and pretty intricate article in Applied Mechanics on using a derivative of cashew nutshell liquid as a prominent alternative for fossil fuels.
Yeah, that seems actually pretty interesting. How about tell us how it works?
So, cashew nutshell liquid might sound weird to anyone who's listening, and I agree because it actually is weird. So essentially the study uses a mixed solution of a biofuel and cashew nutshell liquid and compares it to diesel on stuff like brake efficiency emissions and smoke emissions. Additionally, the study also looks at how oxygen concentrations affect it. Overall, the results show that biofuels were most effective at a 7% oxygen increased concentration. However, they beat out diesel in none of the tests completed, which is really showing as to how effective biofuels are, at least in this form.
Yeah, I actually have an opposing view from that, right? Because scientists in India figured out the optimal combination of oils, biofuels, and diesel using a statistical model, and then they combined it and tested it on a diesel engine.
Tell me more about that.
Right, so they found that biofuels using the Jatropha algae blends, Jatropha is a plant found in India, and then they combined that with algae, and they combined that with diesel, once again, and burned it in a diesel engine. And they found that it emitted less harmful gases, less CO2, less methane, etc., than pure diesel. So they found that the optimal combination of Jatropha algae and diesel was around 10 to 20% of the mixture being biofuel. And what we don't know right now is its cost effectiveness, because it is a more recent discovery and we need to achieve economies of scale to figure that out.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that there could be a biofuel more efficient than fossil fuels, unlike what I found in my study.
Right, so exactly. We found that there is a potential alternative.
Well, if that's really possible, what we're really going to look for now is, are we going to see a change in the near future?
Yeah, well, we might actually, and it could be with this cutting edge nanotechnology. And here's how it essentially works. So the deal is that microalgae are tiny power plants that can be turned into fuels like biodiesel, ethanol, and biogas. And what is the potential here exactly though? They could actually replace a chunk of the fossil fuels that we rely on today.
Wow, that data is extremely telling. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, so now nanotech is where things get even cooler. Nano additives, which are these super small materials, they are boosting how efficiently we can turn microalgae into fuel. For instance, some nanocatalysts can achieve biodiesel yields of over 90%, all while cutting emissions and making the process more eco-friendly for us. They even help recycle materials and reduce waste, which is a huge win.
Are there any downsides to this?
Yeah, so there is unfortunately the flip side, which is cost. These nano additives right now are super expensive, and scaling this for industrial use will be a hurdle. Right now, though, some of the progress is in the labs or the small scale projects. So to make this mainstream, we need breakthroughs in affordability and also large scale production methods.
So looking at the data right now, it doesn't look like we could actually replace fossil fuels in the current moment, and it looks like the main issue is availability, because even though in our June study what we saw was that even though biofuels could potentially be more efficient than fossil fuels, we don't have the ability to replace, and it really looks like there's more of a supply chain issue.
Right on. We'll see where this takes us the next 5 years.
You betcha. There are a couple things you can do to help the biofuels initiatives. First, you can follow our TikTok and join our Instagram lives to stay up to date on any new information in the field.
You could research current and prospective biofuels methods to create your own informed opinion.
You can donate to Northeast Biofuels, the GoFundMe linked in our show notes, to help spur advancements in biofuels research.
You could research your local community's alternatives to fossil fuels and participate in those efforts.
Thanks for watching.
See ya.
Welcome back to another episode of Bridging Realities. We are your hosts, Anthony,
Benny,
Caleb,
and Ethan.
In today's episode, we're going to dive into time travel and wormholes. Are they just science fiction, or can they actually exist according to science? To understand wormholes and time travel, let's first touch on Einstein's general theory of relativity, which describes gravity not as a force, but as a spacetime being curved by mass. Ethan, can you briefly explain what Einstein's theory of relativity describes?
Now imagine a rocket ship approaching a massive object like a black hole. To a distant observer, the rocket appears to slow down due to gravitational time dilation. We all learned in our FroSci class that as the ship gets near the Schwarzschild radius, the point beyond which not even light can escape, it seems to freeze in time and its light becomes increasingly redshifted until it fades away. This is only one of the strange phenomena that Einstein's equations predict. And this is how most people might think time travel is possible. Have someone travel near a black hole.
However, there's an alternate possibility to accessing time travel. In a paper written by Frank Tipler in 1974, theoretical conditions were explored under which time travel might be possible using a massive, finite cylinder to create closed time-like curves. The cylinder would rotate at rapid speeds, causing light cones surrounding the cylinder to be influenced by its movement. The cylinder would basically latch onto these light cones, causing them to tilt, opening rifts in space-time that could connect any two events, past or present. However, while not practical, it shows that general relativity doesn't rule out time travel entirely.
Interestingly, Einstein's equations not only predicted black holes, but also their theoretical counterparts called white holes, and they may even imply the possibility of parallel universes. Initially, scientists thought that singularities, points of infinity, existed at both the Schwarzschild radius and the center of a black hole. That is, if we adopt the spherical coordinate system. However, by transforming coordinate systems, they realized that the singularity at the Schwarzschild radius is just a coordinate artifact and not something physical.
Using Penrose diagrams, which basically condense the entire space-time history of the universe into a single map, we can see that once you cross over the event horizon of a black hole, your ultimate fate is to reach the singularity at the center. These diagrams also reveal regions corresponding to passages to white holes, which spit out everything, when we trace light cones into the past at certain points, implying the existence of a wormhole linking different parts of space-time.
So, can wormholes actually be created?
Theoretically, it is possible. The key challenge is that keeping a wormhole open requires exotic matter with negative energy density. This kind of matter isn't something we've observed on a scale necessarily to stabilize a wormhole.
That being said, there's some intriguing new study that might change how we think about creating wormholes. A study by Dai and others in 2020 explored a fascinating idea using simulations. They suggested that wormhole-like structures could form under classical gravitational fields without needing exotic matter, if we allow multiple spatial dimensions. They theorized that massive objects like stars or black holes can exist on parallel branes, which you can imagine as multidimensional sheets in the universe. Wormhole-like bridges could naturally form due to their gravitational pull.
That's fascinating. It is theoretical, but it is still exciting to think that wormholes might not just be science fiction. Also, in a study conducted by Mississippi State's professor Jinwoo Yi and others, they used a quantum computer to simulate a wormhole. By modeling quantum particles, the researchers successfully tested the teleportation of information through this simulated wormhole, providing a promising glimpse into how quantum systems could reveal deeper connections between gravity, space, and the fundamental law of physics.
While the possibility of wormholes opens up exciting avenues for space travel, and perhaps even time travel, it also brings us some perplexing paradoxes.
Imagine you travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. This would mean you were never born, so you couldn't have gone back in time in the first place.
But then there's Novikov's self-consistency principle, which proposes that any actions taken by a time traveler were always a part of history, so paradoxes can't occur. So that raises the question, how can wormholes be detected?
In a study by Spanish physicist Carlos Sabin, he hypothesized that a wormhole, if it is present in space-time, will emit a detectable phase shift, which can be measured using quantum metrology techniques as well as interferometry technology. Sabin conducted a series of studies suggesting that light passing near a wormhole would experience a tiny phase shift, which could reveal the wormhole's presence from great distances. This allows for a promising new approach in the search for these space-time structures.
That's the end of our podcast. Follow our Instagram account at bridging_realities to stay connected with the latest discoveries in wormhole research. And make sure to even sign up for the Wormhole Weekly newsletter. Get updates on cutting-edge theories and discoveries straight to your inbox.
We hope all of our subscribers enjoyed listening to the topics covered in these podcasts. Till next time.